Hi folks, welcome to this critique. First of all, I must apologise for the delay of this, due to circumstances, let's say. But we've got there, and thanks to those of you that have sent in your work. So yeah, our usual reliable group of contributors, starting here with Bob. It seems like ages ago now, doesn't it, that we did this? But looking at your work here, Bob, it's brought back very nicely and reminded very nicely of the day we did this session. Um, Overall, I think this is great. I think I like in particular this right-hand side over here. I think you've done that greenery incredibly well. Very, very convincing. I think you probably needed a little bit more sharpness in the shadow actually on the bridge, because at the moment it's sort of just very softly, the light sort of dissolves into the right hand side, or vice, the other way of looking at it, the shadow dissolves perhaps a little too softly at its edge around here. So but really, overall this is really good. I think your figures, the painting of your figures, Bob, has come on enormously. These are great, these two figures here. Really like this. um yeah, and I like the way that we've got this. Let me just see if I can mark this, grab this pen here a second. I've forgotten how to do this. um Here we go. Let's just grab. They've changed it like they do. They've changed this app a little bit again. Yeah, sorry. So this area here, you probably just wanted a slightly harder edge there, but really not much wrong with this at all. Just yeah, yeah. So what I was going to say, I like the way you've tied in the left-hand side to the right-hand side with similar sort of textural work here, and be a little bit careful with the sudden jump of texture up here in the left hand side. You could probably just soften that off a little bit, or perhaps what I should be advising rather is, if you're going to go this sort of quite heavy texture up here, then have something similar in this corner over here. Okay, I'm actually looking for my eraser here. I wish they wouldn't change these apps that I use all the time like this. Oh, down here. Okay, it's down here. Remove the ink. Remove the ink. Try that again. It's not working. Okay. There we are. Oh dear. Right, so yeah, I think in terms of your tonal balances throughout here, Bob, are really good. It's a nice hit of dark underneath the bridge here, played off against the sunlight in this area here, like that. Um, don't be afraid to paint a little bit heavier into some areas of the water. You sort of see perhaps a little bit more strength down here in that shadow because of what it's reflecting from underneath the bridge there. But it's good, Bob. That's a very nice painting. I really like those figures. I think they're very, very convincing. My favourite bits are your greenery, your green areas here. And you know what I said about the edge of the shadow on the bridge, that can be so easily painted over. You can paint that again. If you do that, be sure to sort of have a slightly harder edge there and paint the entire shadow again. And because I think what the other thing, of course, here is that as pale as this area is, that this where the sun is hitting the bridge, it is warm. You get a sense of warmth in that colour, even though it's pale. Now you've actually used a warm shadow. Now I'm not really saying that's not right. You can get warm shadows on warm walls, but it's often more aesthetically pleasing that if you're going to put a shadow on a warm wall, or a warm surface, then that shadow color should be cool, at least cooler looking than the illuminated warm area. So yeah, good work, Bob. Lovely painting. Okay, so next up we have Gwen's painting here. Got a little bit of a bleaching effect here, Gwen, from a very bright light, I think. Did you perhaps place this under a lamp when you took a photo of it? But what, as I can see it here, here's a really good example of that hard edge. Let me just change over here. As I say, really, I'm really struggling to with this new app, the way they've changed it. Markup. Here we go. It's gone up here. So yes, sorry. There's a nice edge here to this shadow, and it's you know, picking up where we left off with Bob's there. This is a cool shadow on a warm surface. I really like that. It really does give that sense of summer sunshine. So be a little bit careful. I think these figures here, they did need to stand out a bit more, and of course the only way you're going to make those stand out more, it would be to make them darker. Look at the tonal value. If you just squint your eyes, you lose those figures. You only need to squint your eyes a little bit, and yet those figures disappear. And that's simply because of your tonal. There's no tonal exchange in the background. So over here we have, say, for argument's sake, a tonal value of about 4 or 5, and the figures are very, very close. They're 3, 4, or 5 themselves, and to the left. So you either lighten up the background and darken the figures, or vice versa. You lighten the figures and darken the background. But there's a lovely feel of sunshine in this painting, Gwen. Really lovely feeling of that feeling of warm sunshine. Looking for a sort of grayscale pen I can make here. The light's obviously coming over here. It might be that the fact that you did take this photograph under you know, a bright lamp, is actually assisted in giving this effect to your painting. But you can perhaps, you know, we could discuss that when we talk next at the next Zoom lesson. It's it's a happy painting, Gwen. It really looks lovely. It makes me smile. Just for the warmth and the sunny atmosphere that you've given us in this. Like the texture, good texture in the right and left hand sides here. A nice subtle use of colours too. Yeah, good work, Gwen. Good work, lovely. So next up we have Linda's painting. Wonderful greens, Linda. Fantastic greens. We've to be a little bit careful with this bridge. It seems to sort of yeah, I suppose what we've done, it excuse me, it does. Let me just see if I can get used to this now then. Mark up, down, here we go. There we are. First of all, these greens are very, very good. Using greens is not easy, but you've given this wonderful, really well balanced mix of warm and cool greens here, Linda. Because greens are tricky. And when I found myself sort of advising people to vary their greens, which is essentially you must vary your greens, but more importantly, it's the way you vary them. It's no good having all cold greens or all warm greens. You've got to vary them so that there are both warm and cool greens. Then it'll work. And that's exactly what you've given us here. You've given us a variation of warm greens and cool greens and a couple in between too. Really, really good. What I was going to say about the bridge, I think that there's I'm not sure how convincing that design is. You know, well, I know for a fact there are bridges designed like this, where you know, find yourself walking up onto the top and walking back down quite a steep side on the other. Maybe this is just me being a little bit hypercritical here, Linda. Um, you know, it's just that in my head, it's probably because I know the canal in question and the bridge in question, as it's quite a local landmark from where I live here. You know, I'm just sort of seeing that it's actually very flat at the top here, and it does it. Even though that's obscured by the right-hand side greenery, you've got to try and indicate, I think, you know, I would prefer to sort of indicate that there was a bit more sort of flatness down here, and because usually these bridges are built where the paths are up here somewhere. They're not paths down necessarily down here. This bridge doesn't sort of come down to this level down here that the figures are on. You know, the path tends to be up onto the side here, somewhere like that. So just I am nitpicking. Forgive me, Linda. It's a beautiful looking painting. I have the misfortune of knowing this place too well, probably. That's the problem. It's not you. It's beautifully painted. You might want to just soften the edges of your figures a little bit. It looks as though they're a little bit sort of they're a little bit static, I think, because the edges are a little bit hard all the way around them. So if you could just soften off an area just to one side, doesn't matter which side actually, that left hand side or the right hand side, just soften into them a little bit and you'll find that they don't look quite so sort of cut out and stuck on there. As I said, probably I think it was Bob's painting. Don't be afraid to put paint in the water. I'm going to use a totally inappropriate color again here. It doesn't seem to be giving me a spectrum of colors, just preset colors, I'm afraid. I thought they'd change these things, so that maybe they have. I need to get used to it. I was going to say, you think if they're going to change these applications that they give us on these computers, they'd improve them. Yeah, sorry, what I'm trying to say is this. Don't be afraid to, you know, use strong colours in the water. So at the moment, that doesn't necessarily sort of say water to me. It's a bit too soft and woolly looking. You need some shapes in there, basically, and they can be hard edge shapes too in water. So, and if you do that, Linda, you know, perhaps next time we're at the Zoom class, you can have it to hand and you can show us or show me, if you like, how you've changed it from this. You've got potentially an absolutely stunner here. So, if you're brave enough, go into that water, soften the figures off a little bit, and you know, consider that. Just consider taking that top of that bridge over there, like something like that. Okay, lovely, absolutely lovely work. Next up here we have Ron's painting. I like this, Ron. It's just what you're doing these days with is it brush, is it card, is it some sort of implement that you're using to scrape the surface? Whatever it is you're doing, I like it a lot. Let's grab trying to grab different colors here so it can stand out better. This is really lovely. You've got almost like a blocky, almost like a cubist effect going on in places. Whatever you're doing, whatever you've technique you've used in this run, you must keep this up. I'm really liking this painting. Do you know, it's exciting to see people starting to develop something of their own style. I think we could have lost the left hand. I think where the left hand figure stands against the dark underside of the bridge there, I think that should have been made dark. The back of that figure there, which is where I put that little sort of pink mark, I think that figure should almost disappear. If you just left the top of the shoulders and the head, you'd know that there was a second figure there. At the moment, it just looks as though they're a little bit cut out and stuck on. This is something these are things I'm picking up on in our work at the moment, because we're obviously at a stage, we're at an advanced stage, but where these little things now need ironing out, things like edges and the distance that objects are away from us. You would definitely see a softer transition on the left hand side of that figure into the darkness. The right hand figure is absolutely fine. Just bear that in mind, Ron. Wonderful painting. It's just, it is really refreshing to see. I mean, everything's here. You've got everything in this painting and your design to make this painting work. You've variations in textures, your variation in brushwork, or whatever it is that, however it is you're manipulating your paint on the surface of the paper. Your tonal values, your temperatures, good, no nonsense shapes, not trying to overcomplicate and get too clever with complicated shapes. And yet there's plenty of interest going on there. I really, really like that painting. Great colours, good greens, variation again of warm greens, cooler greens, bright greens, sullied down, sort of greyed down greens. It's all there, Ron. That's really, really nice work. I mean, I don't think this. I'm really careful here, because this is not really a criticism. It's an observation, let's say, rather than a criticism. Obviously, your shadow's coming from. Sorry, your light is coming from the left-hand side, because we've reversed this. We've got the light on the right-hand side of the bridge and the shadow on the left. I think the shadow is probably the only thing that perhaps shouldn't have been applied in the block square effect. What you could do, okay, this is just, as I say, me thinking now, as though this was my painting and not yours, Ron. If I could keep the block effects on the first washes. In other words, whatever it was you applied to the bridge before all the other stuff went on, the other marks went on, you could have established your blocks in the underlying wash. Maybe there was different colors of those things, blocky effects like this. So when that was dry, then when your shadow went on, you treated that as a big flat shadow, like we always do. So the shadow would have then gone over with a little bit of detail at the edge of the shadow. The shadow would have gone over those block marks, and those block marks would have stood out. But your shadow is more blanket-like. Your shadow is more of a single wash. As I say, Ron, I would give that a go at least next time. Just so I think that would offer just a little variation and perhaps a little bit more of a convincing shadow. I think that's what it is. It's just because you've used the same technique for the shadows you have elsewhere in the painting. I think the shadow is the one thing to have applied flat and large rather than blocky. But skill levels, Ron, are something else these days. They've really, really taken off. Great work. Thanks, Ron. So, okay, next up, I think it's Steve. Steve might be, I think we've got Steve and then Suzanne. Wow, Steve, texture. I mean, again, you can drop me an email if you want, Steve. What I'm sorry, I'm thinking and not talking. What I'm thinking is, I'm thinking of your choice to keep your colors very neutral here. You know, it's very expressive, particularly in terms of texture. Have you used sort of cards to scrape in areas over here? Let me just grab the my little sort of drawing implements here a second. Yeah, these areas, let me just grab something that will stand out. This is incredible. I love that. And here, and in a very subtle fashion in here and other areas. And you've played off this, whatever it is this tool, this scraping or whatever it is you've been using in these areas to create this texture, and you've stayed out of some areas and not um, resisted the temptation to use that texture everywhere. It's good balance, very, very good balance of things. Now, it's nice to see some hard edges like I was talking about a moment ago. They don't have to be terribly dark necessarily, but I think you've got enough tonal exchange in the water with some of those harder edges to make that look like water. It actually looks like frozen. This looks very much, and this may have been fully intentional on your part, Steve, and you can educate me and so that, you know, say that this was your intention. It looks like a winter scene, and a very convincing winter scene. So hats off to you. You know, and that's what I think the decision you've chosen here is to make this a winter scene. Good figures, very expressive figures. You can read a lot into these figures, particularly the one on the left. There's almost a sort of Don Quixote sort of swagger about that left-hand figure, that character on the left. That's fantastic. So overall, this is very original, Steve. I think, you know, you should seriously consider, like you need me to tell you, I'm sure this has been fully intentional on your part, is that this could be incorporated in your work for some time now. You should run with this this style that you're developing. It's very original. It's very effective. Um, yeah, great. I like looking at that. It's fascinating. It's good work. Fantastic. I like that. Well done, Steve. Okay. Now I think next up, and I think it's Suzanne. Yep, Suzanne. They're so different, aren't they? You know, we have 5 people contributing here, and there's no similarity. They're all great in their own merit. This is beautiful again, Suzanne. I know a couple of you sort of sent me more than one image, folks. I have to sort of stick to this remit of, you know, I've made the decision for you which one you, in this case, I've made the decision which one to sort of offer the critique for. So, you know, just remember when you're submitting, it's fine to send in more than one, but I will always sort of choose, unless you categorically state in your email to me when you send them in to say Howard, I want you to use the first one or the second one. then what I'll do is I'll make that decision on your behalf, unless you say differently. Um, I chose this one, Suzanne, because I preferred this one out of the two. Now, whether that's beneficial to you in terms of critique is in itself open for debate. Sometimes, sometimes I think one should send in their worst. If they've got two, one's better than the other. Perhaps, you'd get more benefit from asking me to critique the one that's perhaps not up to scratch, if you think that one is not as good as the other, because it's from our mistakes that we need advice, I think, rather than our successes. But I couldn't resist this one, Suzanne. It's such a lovely painting. Again, love the playoff, the really cool shadow here, and the playoff of the cool shadow on the warm, illuminated, sunny side of the bridge. It's always going to work. It's beautiful. It's lovely. It's just the impact of bright, happy, jolly light, um, coupled with really good figures here, and furthering the effects of the sunlight in this area here. Just navigating through the tools on my screen here again. Yeah, let me see if I can increase the width of this and opacity of this. Yeah, this area here, I don't seem to be able to increase the opacity of the paint. This area here is really lovely. The way that you've used the negative dark underside of the bridge there to play to create the dynamics of the sun on the grasses in front there. It's really good. And this is what I was talking about. This is a good example of not being afraid to put shapes in your water. That's really well done, Suzanne. That's convincing looking water. I think you're developing your other textures, like your sort of overhanging trees and foliage here, really well. The balance of that is good. To have placed these harder, darker, smaller bits of information on top of what was a much softer wet in wet effect for your greenery, your green areas, has worked really well as too. Yeah. I mean, it's my job here to try and find something I can give you advice on. If there's one small little issue, it might just be that I think you could have resisted those last couple of shall I, shan't I point. Sorry, let me just change the color here, otherwise you don't know what I'm talking about. I think the trailing off of your shadow in this area here, these smaller marks, that was almost a shall I or shan't I do those sort of marks, and it's easier said than done, I know, but you've got to try and sort of be committed to that. I'd have taken these sharp, sorry, that was way too big. I'd have taken those little marks and been a bit more assertive about them, something like that, perhaps. Having to play around again, and not have wiggled them, in any sort of weird shape like that. Have them travel straight across the surface of that bridge. But again, I've really liked what you've sent in, all of you folks. This is lovely, Suzanne. It's a lovely painting. I think your work is coming on really, really well. So that brings us to the end of this critique, folks. It was a short one. It was very late. Thanks for your patience, everybody. And for those of us that who choose not to perhaps submit work, which is absolutely fine, folks. But I think we all sort of take our hat off and say a thanks, big thanks to those that have submitted their work again for the critique, because we do all benefit from it. So yeah, well done, folks. Just keep up the great work, and we'll see you at the next one.